Welcome all. Attention deficit disorder or ADD or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We'll talk about Scattered Minds by Gabor Mate MD. We'll talk about the traits of ADD, how it is happening, what is its relation with genetics and family, like or environment as well. And we'll talk about healing, how the brain works, what's really causing ADD, lot of interesting aspects. So if you have an ADD, like a situation, a medical problem, usually whom you should go? Should you go to a doctor, maybe a specialized doctor, that's true. But in this case, somebody is specialized in ADD, right? But how about a doctor who's having an ADD and who got children's having ADD, and he is a research doctor who written books on ADD. So I hope that makes it to a very niche person who is having a best person to go and ask for it. So that is actually Gabor Mate. He is a doctor. He was having ADD and he treat ADDs and all. And he is writing many books. One of the book is this one. Let's go straight into the book. Nature of ADD, attention deficit disorder. So ADD is usually considered as something like a genetics. Okay, it is there, but that's not all. We cannot completely tell, yes, it is genetics, but at the same time, it is somehow half or both are having effects. Maybe I'll tell like that. So for a person having attention deficit disorder, mainly there are three things. That's first one is tuning out or just getting absent from the actual scenario. Second option is impulsiveness. He's more impulsive and more aggressive person in that way to others. And third thing, a characteristics of ADD is hyperactivity. So for sure, you will be worried about seeing it is in a child mostly, but that is still in adults as well. Adults, maybe they will look at themselves or their spouse will look at it, something like that. So what is actually happening in ADD? It's something like your brain is working on multiple sweeping of plates. Like many things are happening at the same time. Something similar to a traffic or something. So you're not letting go of anything. Imagine you capture everything what you see from a day to a night. You will think that, okay, that's a great memory. Maybe on some occasions, for example, you are sitting in a classroom and listening to a lecture. Maybe in that case, yes, that is interesting. But in another scenario, it will be like a disaster if you remember everything. The beauty of our memory is that there is a great gift we have is to forget things, letting go of things. But that letting go will not happen properly in ADD or attention deficit disorder. It's something like a soup of thoughts. You know how the soup is there. It just mixed and crushed and something you cannot identify which one is what. So there is no active attention happening here. And for ADD also, it is not consistent every time. Sometime it happen in some way, sometime in another way. I'm just giving you some flavor of what the ADD look like. So two parts. First of all, ADD, yes, you can see it from a person. Okay, you look at a person, you see ADD, or you look at yourself, you evaluate yourself, you see ADD there. But at the same time, you can look at the genetics on a DNA of a person and try to understand Not only on that level, you can look at, okay, ancestors having it, parents having ADD. That level of thinking also you can look at it. But the point is that both is affected, but mainly more than genetics, more than something out of your control. Or in another way, environment is acting on the genetics. So there is some field in genetics called epigenetics, talking about how the environment affecting the genes and all. So here, for an ADD person to happen, his environment is working on it, and the brain is somehow working on a survival mechanism to switch on and switch off some things. So even the hyperactivity of a person, of an ADD person, is something like his brain is inactive, and that is getting compensated by his outer body. So if you work with somebody like having an ADD, it's something like you're working on a tornado. So you cannot catch up with such people. It will be very difficult. So also they will be time blind. That's somehow especially a characteristics of child. For example, normally children, they don't get a sense of time. Every block of time is infinite for them. That's an important thing. But at the age of 7 or something, they will have some idea about what the things are look like. But for an ADD person, even when he get adult, he will still have that problem. So somehow time blind, so that gets out of focus and all. So prefrontal cortex of our brain, which makes us special as a mammal, is something responsible for such level of emotional and such parts. Actually, for such people, that's go on off. So what's really making us human, what's really making us like creative and attentive and focusing, lot of things, it has multiple aspects, as we call it prefrontal cortex. That's making us, that goes off sometime. So imagine a traffic signal where an intersection, imagine an intersection of traffic. So a lot of vehicles are coming, and it is controlled by a policeman. So a traffic policeman will tell, okay, go this way, that, or he'll take the direction. But imagine this traffic policeman go on sleep. What will happen? Every vehicle will try to enter to the intersection. Somehow everybody will have a chance to go to the intersection, but the end result will be that none of them can get out from that intersection. So overall, the speed or the movement will be collapsed, considering no policeman there. So your prefrontal cortex is something like a policeman, a traffic policeman. And for ADD, that policeman is in sleep. And there is some drama going inside, will go there much, and there is much action going outside because of the drama inside. Let's go to the next chapter. How the brain develops ADD. There is something called genetic fundamentalism. What it does mean is that we treat everything to ADD, or like everything to genes. Whatever is the cause, like suppose say diabetes or cancer or anything, we somehow go and put everything under genetics, which is called genetic fundamentalism. So contribution, for sure, genetics has a contribution to ADD, but that is not a decisive contribution. Say you have relatives who got ADD. There is some one book called "It Did Not Start With You," like the traumas and everything. It did not start with you. It would have been there before. There are some books like that. So for sure, the traumas of your family, your mother, and all such people will have some effect on you, but that's not a decisive characteristics. Suppose there is something like an ignored topic on ADD, which is for the adopted childs. And why it is happening, if you try to evaluate that situation, what is happening is that mostly this adopted, the children who is getting adopted, is that their parents will have like unlikely child and they were stressed at that time and then give it for adoption to some, or mother will have too much stress on such things, which is having an extramarital relation or whatever it is, or before marriage. So such stress is carried about from the mother to the child. So that's something like. So for example, it is told that the book told that if mother has 8 children, then that simply means that you have 8 mothers, because those treatment will not be same. Even mother will tell that okay, every children is same for me. It is actually 5 perceptions will be taken care by that 5 children, even though mother behave in that way. Sometimes a small stimulus will create big reaction in such people, like hyperactivities and all. So that's hair trigger alert like that. So for sure there is something getting transmitted in the genes, but that is not the exact ADD character, something the sensitivity is carrying down. So an information and an energy is transmitted for the survival mechanism, how that mother treated, how the mother approaching the things, such things, yes. So environment makes the brain. Even you consider all the mammalian brain usually grows even after the birth. But the speciality of human brain, unlike other mammals, is that human frontal lobe will grow after the birth. Maybe just speciality of our character, like we stand and such things, and to give birth easily. Maybe the evolution is so the brain is growing quadruple times in the first years and all, like it will create synapses. Even after the birth, the order of the mother will create nerves firing inside the human brain. So actually the brain is something like a complex super system of super systems, something like having a billion neurons, each having a trillion connections, or not each, maybe more than a trillion connections. There's something which we cannot. But if you look at other mammals, like a horse baby will start walking the next day. A chimpanzee is same thing, like after apes and all, after weeks and all. But if you look at a human brain, your human baby, it is so much vulnerable and it is having so much growth after the birth, unlike any other mammals. And that birth is actually happening, or that growth is actually happening by inspiring from the environment. So what is in the environment, that is getting captured and that is getting evaluated, studied and growing from that. So that really matters. So there is something called a famous experiment called double TV experiment, which is something like CCTV cameras. Mothers are sitting on one room and babies are sitting on another room. And mother tried to show some gestures, hi, like that, just to see that how babies respond to it. Because usually we imagine that okay, a sight of a mother should create some proportionate response in the child. But what is interesting is that we did not get that much level of response in a child. And when they analyze the situation, what's really happening is that it's not the sight of that mother which is creating that response in the child. Instead, how that cues are getting transferred. Like if a child just smile or something, that cue back, that cue back and a lot of body languages and such things are also creating that response. It's not only just a vision is creating such a thing. So that social stimulus and nerve. So we have something called orbitofrontal cortex, which is something behind the right eye, which is in the front side, which is being mainly tells about what to focus on. Like for example, you are focusing on me now. Your orbital frontal cortex is in charge now. Otherwise, you could have go and skip on something. You will look at it, some movies or something like that. So Donald Hebb, which is usually tell that he's considering something about neurons. The neurons which fire together are wired together. That's his proposition. So somehow, when you have a trigger, that creates something like a group of neuronal circuitries, and later on that same trigger happen, that group of things will fire together. It will happen in the baby, but for sure it is happening before the birth. Even the baby is in the mother womb, whatever is happening, that umbilical cord connection is also taking that circuitry there. So what is anxious inside, that chemistry is telling lot of creations inside the neural physics inside the baby body. And even that, before the birth, before many generations, that information is also coded in the brain for sure, for the genes. But what to activate, what to not activate is based on the situation. Even Gabor Mate, the friends or his relatives, or especially his mother and father, they were being in Germany and Austria and all during the World War period, and their mother got lot of stress in that time, and father was being isolated, she was being deported and transported. All such things is in that gene and transmitted to that. Even after the birth, the child will look at the mother and father and see what is so all those things are getting. That is what makes the doctor Gabor Mate an ADD. He is telling himself like that. So genetics is there, but you need something to switch on there. What is to switch on? That is environment, the social stimulus, that is switching on the nerval pathways, that is switching on what is deep inside your cell, the genetics as well. So that's how brain develops ADD. Let's go to the next. Roots of ADD, family. Maybe this is a topic of interest. If you are looking at it as a parental way, you look at the roots of ADD in your child, this is something important. So what's happening is that, as I mentioned previously, Gabor Mate have such a antecedents regarding that topics. So when there is a negative factors affecting, like emotions of life, marriage, that affects the children as well. So parental abusal history, mistreatments and such things. So it is parents, so it is children somehow, as I mentioned. So Antonio Damasio, the famous neuro doctor or neural writer, he told that to understand the brain, you should understand the social and cultural aspects of the brain as well. So nowadays, absent-mindedness is somehow being celebrated. If you're short span, even the reels, the shorts and such things, if you're absent-minded or if you're short-sighted, it is considered as something good. And we are very, attention span of our generation is actually constricting. So that's how the situation is there. So somehow that is a coping mechanism. In psychology, it's called dissociation. So it's like a coping mechanism nature give for emergency survival. It's something like especially in ADD, it is somewhere like a severe stress and like helplessness. With Marty Seligman, if you study psychology and all, you have that dogs and all similar things like severe stress and helplessness, that is getting dissociated and you go to and tune out. So brain don't want to just do something. Like imagine you have I don't want to consider brain as a computer, but imagine you have a computer or phone or something, give something to it which is too much overwhelming. What it will do is it just go stuck or to go crash, to avoid crashing. And it will tell, okay, wait, or shall I restart? Similar to that situation, that's what happening here. So parental anxiety, if it will elevate, because normally nobody is born with ADD. Actually, the conditions, even suppose your ancestors have ADD, if there is a proper care given or proper healing is provided, you can still solve that ADD problem. So it is not 100% or it is not always there. It is something in our control. Even though many of the things happening in ADDs, it is something like autonomous nervous system happening, but still if there is a secure environment, if there is a proper caregiver, And if that severe stress and such helplessness is being taken care, you can heal that ADD parts. So it's not something like you have your parents have ADD. That doesn't mean you cannot solve it. It's a solvable problem, and it is not always written in the genetics. You can rewrite it somehow. You can heal it. So no action, because especially for ADD people, it's tell that hyperactivity is actually triggered by if there is no action, you feel like you are not alive. So something like that. So autonomous nervous system is usually, we have two type of autonomous nervous system has two parts, sympathetic and parasympathetic. So sympathetic is something like which consume energy, and parasympathetic is something like which preserve energy. So it's like a coping mechanism. But suppose happening like if there is only sympathetic is working, that gives a situation where you will only spend the energy, but you should have rest also. So you're sleeping and such things is happening using parasympathetic. So such people, the brain go it into chaos. Like I explained before about the traffic policeman situation. Something is there. So give a secure social environment and care that can reduce lot of such parts also, that triggers and such things. There is an interesting books by Hooked by Nirayal, not something about psychology, but something about how the brain develops and hooked and all. If you're interested, you can have a look at it. So let's go to the next section of the book. Meaning of ADD traits. We live in a world where absent-mindedness is the new normal. Like, it's okay, it's being celebrated. We live where reels and shorts are important. Even something like absent-mindedness is maybe mistakenly evaluated as something like a flaw, which chicks and me high topics and all. Like, you're too much involved on that, so that's why you're absent-mindedness. You're so much dedicated, such things. But actually, for ADD, that's not the situation. You have distress, chronic stress and helplessness, which is creating such a situation. So you are not born with attention, and you're not supposed to be attentive always. You should have a selective ignorance. Your brain is developed in that way. As I mentioned, you're not supposed to capture everything around you. What is important is that what is important for your life and sustaining the life, that is going to be taken care by the brain. And how you know that, it is how you perceive that, how you are getting perceived, how you are being taught by the environment, by the people. Environment doesn't mean that it's only parents. It can be a lot of people. So that security, attention and care, that is really important. So there is no action, there is no life. That's somehow the traits is talking about. So ADD and hyperautomatics, that's mainly talking about that. So let's go to the next. So ADD and healing. So parental attitude matters. Yes, how you look at the people. It's because mainly this is not something about children, but adults will be trying to know ADD to understand or resolve their children. So that we are talking about that. So mammalian brain growth never ends. Even if you're somebody in your 60s, your brain will have some cell deterioration, but still your brain will be developing and you will create a lot of connections and patterns. When you read this book, that will create some patterns around you. Same like that. So learning never ends. Your brain development will not stop anytime. That's why we are telling like that. So we have a very much plastic brain somehow. So rejection against criticism. So experience shape that things. So somehow if you judge a person, if you overpraise a person, they will have a situation where that somehow is not going to help such an ADD person. Instead, don't keep a judgment. Let them have their way of things like that. So try to understand the stress and shame behind it and be with them, such people. If the parent shift, instead of like instead of putting a control on a kid, just put it like a fish in a sea or a sheep in a big meadow. Like let them wander, let them be responsible, let them be self-autonomous. That is actually a best solution for, because that autonomous things will indirectly or unconsciously teach them the security and their control and their responsibility towards their life. If there is too much parental control, they will feel vulnerable when there is no such a care and control. But instead, if you practice this autonomous thing, that will thrive creativity, responsiveness, learning, self-dependence, and all such things. And that's really important, because you don't have to make your child you, because people always think that, okay, if your child is having less of something or less marks or something, it is something like they are representing you. But if you I just try to copy Khalil Gibran from the Prophet, your children are not you. They are from you, but they are not you. They are the arrows which is sent to the future. So you are just a bow only. So don't make them like you. Let them be themselves. So that's really important. So that's something from my side, just an addition from Gibran. We have a book in the channel about Khalil Gibran's Prophet as well. Check it out if you like. I'll add it in the description as well. So just looking for attention. You know that children seeks attention. If a child is very busy playing and you talk about something, he will try to cry or something to get that attention, or he'll try to talk something, or he'll ask something, I want this, I want that. So seeking attention is there, because seeking attention is something related to the care as well. So somehow parents get desperate. Okay, I have done all this. They will tell, okay, I've give you this much, I've give you that. So I'm desperate. They will try to blame the child. Okay, what are you doing? Like, I am working for you. A lot of such things, somehow desperate words on the children. But if you look at another way, actually this children is doing most of the things automatically, and they're trying to get attention. They have this stress and shame and anxieties and insecurities. That's all creating such a thing, especially for a children like ADD. For sure, any children will have such attention seeking deficit, because there are many people, adults, who get, like, one example is talking about abandoned music career by parents. So there is a will and counter will. So will is something from your side, okay, you want something. But then there is a counter will which sometimes you cannot oppose. Okay, you have, say, your father or somebody counter willing, you cannot do this. And somehow that wins. That creates the same situation what we have in ADD. It creates a chronic stress and it creates helplessness. So chronic stress plus helplessness equal to ADD. It's an equation. So in that aspect, that's actually happening. So later on, when that same child grow up, say somebody, especially these ADD people have difficulty in working under some managers and all such people as well, because they don't want to be controlled, and they go and make their own company, and they tell that, okay, because I don't want them to be controlled. But in another way, that's actually happening, because the book talk about this counter will. Opposition is the counter will, is that unthinking opposition. So best way to diffuse that counter will is to, as I mentioned, to give them their space, invent and wander, or study and wander. So let them do, watch. Even your sheep is there. As a shepherd, just look at the sheep. Maybe sometime tiger will come there. But it's not about that. But the point is that allowed them to have that level of autonomous, keeps room for some resistance. You don't have to make the children comply. Compliance is not necessarily parenting. Compliance is not required. But somehow there is some room for resistance. You don't have to love and care in such a way that there is not at all a no possible. But whatever your children ask, that's not something like parenting, or maybe you will consider it as most lovely parent, but somehow that's not going to love. Even the God will not give you everything, because he wants you to learn from your environment or from your experiences. So not everything, there should be some room for resistance there, so some level of control. So then encourage self discipline, that's important. Okay, you can tell your child, okay, switch off the TV by 9 o'clock. But in another way, you can tell the same child, switch off the TV before you get your sleep. Don't watch TV in such a way that you will not get a proper sleep, you will not be able to perform better tomorrow. That level of thinking will create their own self-discipline. Instead of somebody going and taking the remote and switching off the TV, they are going to switch off the TV themselves. So that's totally different actually. So such level of things is actually healing. So that's really important aspect as well. So let's go, that's somehow I think the end of the book. So let us meet us in the next book. Until we come across with the next book, thank you for your all support. Feel free to comment, like, only if you feel it interested. Otherwise, wait for us. Thank you. If you enjoy this summary, like and follow us. We love to see your insights in the comment box. Subscribe,